Hello, and welcome back to the Special Education Insights podcast. Today's conversation, we have the incredible Dr. Brianna Cicero, and she's the Director of Special Education at Pennsylvania STEAM Academy Charter School, which actually is quite interesting because this school is in person and not cyber school. Usually when we hear charter, we think that it's an online school. So of the many things that make her perspective incredibly unique, the thing that really stands out is that she is still in the classroom every single day, and she navigates the realities of special education in a high poverty urban setting every single day. So with her experience spanning from MTSS leadership, emotional support classrooms, and district-wide systems, she brings a very rare, still with boots on the ground lens to this work. So Dr. Brianna Cicero, thank you so much for spending time with us here today, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know, as we mentioned in the intro, that you do sit in a really unique position as the director and as somebody who's still in the classroom. What is this ability of yours to be in both places at once bring to you that other people might miss, especially when they're only a director and they're no longer in the classroom?
Yeah, I think something unique. So, I was ready to start to use some of my, master's, my doctorate, things like that. But I was in this situation where I was like, well, I don't really fully want to leave the classroom. And so this role had kind of popped up and I was like, well, let me explore, and kind of see what that's like. And I think having the opportunity to be in the classroom, I get to still continue to see, the paperwork of special ed, but, in real time. So I get to see what's working. I get to see what's not. I'm not, just popping in and getting that airplane view, as I like to call it, of things. I'm still actively working with students, still actively in there. So when I go in to observe one of my teachers, it's not like it's been 5, 6, 7 years since I've, been in their shoes when they're like, hey, for my observation this quarter, I want you to observe, my 10:30 class, because this group I'm just struggling with, I'm coming in and like I might have just come off of a class myself that I was maybe having, that struggle with. So I just think it keeps things real. I think it keeps things fresh. And I think it gives your team not more respect for you, not that they don't respect you if you don't, but more respect for like the input that you're giving, because you're also like living and walking that same experience with them.
Definitely, completely. They're right there with you by your side, which is also really nice. Do you find that you have meetings where you're able to collectively sit down about your classrooms and the experiences that you're having, which if you're in a cyber setting, you don't necessarily get the same feedback or the same camaraderie that you might get as being in person?
Yeah. So my team, we meet like bi-weekly. And of course, like, yes, it's, the updates. Are we on track with the evals and this kid's due here and the IEP due dates and all the logistical things that like, right, we have to do. But then we're also meeting with like, hey, so-and-so is showing this or so-and-so is showing that. And, we sit there and we problem solve and we talk about it. I also try to get into not just my special education team, but the teachers' grade level team meetings. I try to get into those. That they have like their mandated grade level team once a week. So I try to get in once or twice a month to all the grade levels, just so it's like, hey, here's special ed. Do you have questions, concerns? Even if it's something as like, hey, I know so-and-so is under eval, but I forget what the timeline is. Or if it's something, more about, hey, this has been working for so-and-so. Now all of a sudden they're like, nope. And, every time we try to present this, there's this behavior or there's that. And so I try to pop in those too. So not only am I taking that to my, direct team, but also with our general ed grade level teams as well.
That's amazing because that really is fluidity on both ends because they go in and out of different classrooms. So that's really, really helpful for people. Do you find that the things that are working, like, for example, what are some of the things that are really working because you're able to not just be in the classroom, but to go throughout the school to really be able to support those students?
Yeah, I think obviously it shows up with like, yes, our students who receive learning support services and have that specific learning disability, because right, it's going to be same language, same, things like that. But I think where we've really seen that consistency and really seen I would say a bigger difference than what you might see in some other settings has to do with our students who qualify for like emotional support, or they have that positive behavior support plan, or because, we're looking at, okay, it's working here in their pull out class, it's working here in science and social studies and ELA, but okay, it's not working in math. Well, then let's get to the, bottom of it, because we know we're all on the same page. We're all executing, the supports with fidelity. And so then it doesn't just feel like the math teacher doesn't just feel like, well, I'm on an island and this kid just, it just isn't working. Maybe they need different supports for math. Maybe that's their most challenging subject. And so the behaviors are going to come out, as avoidance or something like that. So I think we really see it in like we're able to, I think, not only see that progress, but when there is something that doesn't match the other progress, more quickly diagnose or see it because we're all so much on the same page.
Yeah, definitely. How many students and the school district that you're in that you are able to have that much? It really feels a lot like community, that there really
Yes.
is an integrated support network going on.
Yeah, so we do always say like we are a school community. We're a character first school, all of those things, right? And that's not just special ed, that's across the board who we are as a school. Right now we have 440 students, but we are growing a grade level a year, like adding students till our charter's fully built out because we're in our 5th year. So we'll have close to 800 by the time that, everything is fully built. So
That's incredible. Oh my goodness, that's wonderful to hear. I know we talked a little bit about being able to really have that legal excellence because we absolutely want to follow up with the IEPs and we want to make sure that we're all in compliance. How do you find you're able to maintain that and still meet the real human needs of these students? Or do you find that you're so focused on meeting these standards and these policies, especially in the state of Pennsylvania, where they are very specific, just like with many states, but in the state of Pennsylvania, where you and I are actually both located, how do you go about meeting their human needs? Are you able to do that collectively, or do you find it to be like this constant balance that you're working on?
yeah, I mean, I think like most people in special education say, yes, it is a balance. It is challenging to make sure that, everything is always done in a way that, right, we meet student first while also meeting our legal, like, obligations. But I think because I am so hands-on, like I can very much see, okay, if this student needs small group testing, if they need, modified question count, I'm popping in for, 5-10 minutes during a test when they have it, making sure all of that's going on. And so I think like, right, while, little Johnny might have, no more than 2 options on multiple choice questions on his accommodations, I see that's happening in real time. So yes, I'm making sure it's in the paperwork. We know he's being successful, but then also seeing it happen across environments. I also say something I kind of do to combat that. So like students know I have an open door policy. So like even parents are kind of used to it now. Like my door is always open. I actually have the inside of it decorated because I just don't really I rarely close my door unless I'm like giving like state testing that I have to like have that environment. But, they're just used to it. So like, oh, they got, an A on their spelling test, that with their spelling words at their level. It's like kind of the culture for like, oh, they're on the way to the bathroom and like they pop in and they're like, oh, Misty, look what I got on my test. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I think our balance of me being able to have my hand kind of everywhere, but also just that community aspect of like, okay, well now they're showing it to me hands on. I see all the legal stuff's being met at the same time that the students' true needs are also being met.
I love that you're able to do that and that you really do have an open door policy, because I think that does make a huge difference when teachers are very approachable and kids know that they're approachable, because they'll come to you and they'll say, oh, hey, I did good, rather than thinking they can only talk to the teacher when they're in trouble or something like that. So that's fantastic. Do you find that the teachers that you lead also take that incredible privilege and opportunity to come to you with that open door policy?
Yeah, I think as a whole, our school, we really try to promote like we're a team and the same standard of excellence and the same standard that we expect of all of our students. We also want our staff to model that. So like I tell teachers, I'm like, right, if you need help modifying a test for a student, I'm like, let me know, share it with me, put 10, 15 minutes on my calendar if you want to modify it, and then sit down and be like, hey, is this good, for so-and-so's needs? Should this be broken down further? Should this? And so, I'm always doing that as well, and just sitting with teachers and, looking at student needs and making sure that homework, assignments, notes, for some of our older grades, meet all of those expectations. And I think, yes, it is an additional layer or is an additional thing to do when teachers already have a lot to do. I recognize that, but I try to really create that open door across students and teachers so that you understand, like, yes, I'm on the front lines with you teaching, but then in my role as a director, I'm also here to help support you. All I ask is like right communication so we all know what we need and we can work together to give the students what they need.
That's amazing. Do you find that, so it feels not only do you walk the walk, you talk the talk, and you encourage your teachers to do the same, which is absolutely outstanding. Was there a teacher in your life or a mentor in your life that really cultivated that in you, or that you saw that and you were like, I want to emulate that?
Yes. So I actually it's kind of funny. So right before break, actually, one of my fifth graders was like, Miss C, when did you know you wanted to be a teacher? And I was sitting there talking with one of my fifth graders. But so when I was in eighth grade, I say she was the best Algebra 1 teacher. Like, I did not like math. I tell my students that I don't like math. I joke sometimes if we're doing a math lesson, y'all, we're all going to get through math together. Like, it's, kind of funny. But my Algebra 1 teacher, the way she timed it, she came in every morning that she would have like an hour or 45 minutes to like work for her and, whatever she needed to do. And then we all had like these laminated passes that like we could, starting at like 7:15 until the bell rang at 8, like we could come to her for extra help. Like all we had to do was show the like whatever the early morning monitor people, because my middle school buses dropped off like some of them super early and we literally had like 30 minutes, 40 minutes before our bell rang. And we just showed that and we were able to come up for help. And Algebra 1 was the first time I really like struggled with like anything. And I was like, I just don't get this. Like, I just want to pass. Like, I don't want to repeat algebra. And just like all the effort that she put in to try and like ensure that I was successful. And like, obviously, I saw it then as an eighth grader, right? You're giving me extra time, you're doing this. But now, like, looking back as an educator myself, I'm like, whoa, like,
Totally. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I hated math, and I had a really good sixth grade math teacher. I had a private tutor that just went above and beyond because I needed that much math support. So he was my special education teacher, and I would go to him for tutoring for math. And then my ninth grade math teacher, like some people just really level up in their care in how you deliver. And you can absolutely see 1,000% that that's what you offer your students. And that's amazing. Do your teachers come to you with other things that their teachers did, that what inspired them too?
yeah, I mean, like, I know one of our teachers used to teach, she was a gen ed teacher and then decided to go into special ed. And ironic timing, like, we had an opening there. She could stay at our school and all of that. So she joined our team this year. And, like, I think for a lot of them, it's just like we all have a passion of, like, meeting kids where they are. And I think everyone in our school has that passion. We do a great job at that in general in our school, but like especially for our, identified learners, right? Like I tell the story all the time of like, I have a student who I've worked with him both years now I've been there. So I traveled with my caseload. The caseload I came in with last year, I traveled with them this year and moved up with them. So that way, as the school grows, my caseload doesn't get any larger, but that the kids I started with, like the promise that I made that I would see them out K through 8, that like I would see them out K through 8. And one of the kids, he came to me he was a fourth grader last year, could not read at all. And he's, worked really, really, really hard. And we use like our leveling system is like color coded, but pretty much the color that he's equated to now puts him at like a third grade level. And so like, I think all of us in our team specifically have that passion of, right, like that kiddo's never going to pop up still 2 grade levels behind in reading on state testing as being like above and beyond, or they're never going to get that quote unquote, looking like they're where they should, but we're like, that kiddo went from not reading to 3rd grade in 2 years. That's more than a grade level of progress. That's more than 2 grade levels of progress. Like, he already climbed his, like, as we say in our department all the time, we're like, he climbed his Mount Everest. Like, he did what he had to do. And I think that's what our team is all centered around, is like, we want all students to be successful, but we all have a passion for those students who have climbed their Mount Everest, so to say, and won't necessarily ever see it show up. We want to make sure they continue, right? Because he's still going to sit there at 5th grade text. It's still going to be hard for him, realistically, but he now has the ability to access it from gaining those skills.
That is absolutely huge. Oh my gosh. I was going to actually ask, do you find that there's a correlation between the area that you're in? So I know we mentioned that there was a bit of poverty in your area. Do you find that there's a correlation between the poverty piece, the special education piece, and then even, especially what's becoming probably more prevalently discussed or more common to hear, trauma in the kids that you're interacting with? Do you find that it's occurring much more? Do you find that they're embedded in each other? What does that look like in your experience?
Yeah. I mean, I will say, like, our school social worker and myself share a lot of kids. So, like, I laugh, but, like, we do share kids. And I think, it comes down to sometimes lack of resources in communities like mine, where the parents come to us and they're like, I know my kid can't read, or I know my kid can't write, or I know my kid can't, but like, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. Sometimes they don't have access to the right insurance to even get, a medical diagnosis of some sort, to get even like a 504 or something. Not that that's the end all be all for all kids, but at least, to start something, or to, get in with like BHT services, or, they just don't know. And so I think sometimes we have these kids that go 3rd, 4th, 5th grade without parents having the resources. We find them coming into our school where they've just kind of been lost in a larger system. And us being a smaller school, we're able to have those touch points. And so I definitely think that, a lot of it goes back to just, we don't have the resources in our communities easily accessible all the time. And then, you get in conversations where the parents are like, yeah, I know my child needs more support. I have no idea what it is or where to start. And you're like, well, okay, we're having this conversation now. You're acknowledging that they need some sort of more support. Here's where we can start, and here's what we can do to get that ball rolling and make sure that the support they need, that they get.
If you could have a magic wand, or even if we had this conversation in 5 years, what would you love to see happen in that community, or even within your school district, whether it be AI related or something else, to come in and help support that exact problem that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hardest thing is, from at least, my perspective, and I'm still learning some of the charter school things and the ins and outs of that coming from a district. But, I think we're in this unique position as the smaller schools to be able to really know our students. Like I say, for better or for worse, we know our students. And I think it would be great if, in an ideal world, where we had access to more funding because we do know them, and we had access to, creating more of these avenues. We do grants, we do things like that. But I think either that component, or just the concept of community partnerships and finding ways to, we're working on some of them. We've gotten some rolling over the last couple years, but like really leveraging as a community school to be able to work with community partners to connect our families. Because we're not just trying to like help our students, we're trying to help their families as a whole and change, we say change outcomes, change educational outcomes in our city. So I think that would be huge, just to help with some of that, because it really is like a lack of resources and or lack of access to resources that a lot of them struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, especially in 2026, I know teacher retention is so important. What would you love to see happen to help that? Or where do you think teachers would want more support? And I know we can't make more time, especially with all the paperwork that teachers have to do. Where else might they be able to be more supported?
Yeah, I mean, something that like I know I've taken on personally just in my role is, I tell my teachers, like, all right, if you have, just to use an easy date, like today's the 6th, if you had an IEP meeting on the 8th, like, give it to me by X date or let me know it's done in IEP Writer, by, X date if you'd like me to glance over it. But I send out all the like invites to participate, all the NORUPs. I finalize all of those. I create our calendars for the month. So like I do all those little things so that my teachers are truly just focused on like the IEP itself, to at least buy back them a little bit of time. So I do that. I like, I'm lucky in that my team that I have, a lot of them have spent time in large districts. And while there's nothing wrong with large districts, they like the close-knit community personalization sense of our school. So I'm lucky in that most of them have been somewhere else and realize that this helps that. And so in my frame of mind, I'm like, all right, I already know that this school, just by our size, by our nature, fits A, B, and C of their needs. How can I make sure that they don't get overwhelmed by the special ed aspect? Because special ed has a lot to it no matter where you're doing it. The hard thing I think about the charter school is, right, like you don't have those case management laws that you do in other settings. So like you might have emotional support kiddos that you're managing, as well as autistic support kiddos, as well as and so making sure that for me, they feel supported and trained on all types of students and don't feel overwhelmed by the number of different types of needs.
Yeah, definitely. And another question would be, what did you believe about special education at the beginning of your career that's changed now?
Yeah. So the funny thing is, I kind of joke that I like a little bit got into special ed by accident. Because I was actually in a co-taught gen ed classroom and I was teaching 10th grade English. It was 10th grade English and history co-taught. And it was kind of like history was taught, but then like you taught English alongside of it. So rather than introducing a whole different subject or a whole different topic for something, right? If we just learned about this war, their essay might be about that, but practicing those English skills, for example. And I remember it was a different charter school, different area. And I was like, there are so many needs in these classrooms. I can't give these kids a 5-paragraph essay. Like, what? No. And my co-teacher, super veteran teacher, super amazing. I was like a second year teacher at the time. So like, had my first year down, but completely moved grade levels. And like, it felt like my first year all over again. So I was like trying to figure it out. And I was like, well, this kid can't do this. I'm going to modify this like this for him. And this kid, he's in 10th grade on a kindergarten reading level. That's a whole nother problem, but we got to work with what we have right now and doing this and this and all the things. And I remember it was like after like a marking period, we were on one of our planning periods and my co-teacher turned to me. He's like, you realize you need to like do special ed, right? And I was like, no, like this is, I love ELA. I love this. Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you literally act like a special ed teacher for our class because we had so many undiagnosed needs at that point in time. No one's fault, just there was a lot of turnover at that time and just whatever. And so then I think when I went into special ed, I think I had like an idea of like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what, how you have to do it, that kind of thing. And over time, I realized like, while that may work, we're still in these situations for a reason. So I think now at this point in my career, especially the last like 3, 4, 5 years, I've gotten to this point where like, I'm like, okay, we can't continue to teach non-traditional learners in traditional methods. Like just pulling a kid for an hour of reading intervention, doing the same things in their classroom, but in a smaller group isn't necessarily going to work. In some cases, maybe they're, if it's just a distraction type of focus issue, maybe, but we already know that they're non-traditional learners and they don't learn in traditional ways. So we can't continue to do more of the same. So like I've really gotten to the point like my students do project-based learning. They, we progress monitor somewhat through that. So that's what a lot of my like doctoral research is, all like project-based learning in special education. So for example, we learn a bunch of math concepts and math ideas in foundational math. And this was something we did last school year. And then they had to take it and they had to create it into a game that could be played. And so like if they were doing, multiplication facts or addition or whatever, they were practicing and having to make the problems, practicing the skills, checking it, but also using logic and using, writing as well, because they were writing out directions and practicing their speaking and communication. Because then we held a day in our big, large multi-purpose room where classes and parents and guardians and whoever, other teachers, were invited in to like play the games. So I think the beginning of my career, I very much thought like, oh, they just need more of what they're already doing. But that's not necessarily the truth. And, we have to find non-traditional ways to reach our non-traditional learners. And that's something that I like really stand by.
I was going to say, you should bumper sticker that. And it might actually go hand in hand with my last question for you. If you could change one thing or one part of special education tomorrow, knowing everything that you know, what would you change first?
Yeah, I think a lot of us in special education are scared to step outside the box, right? Because we think we have to stay in the box because there's paperwork and there's this and there's that. And oh my gosh, the progress monitoring and the data and all the things. I would change that mindset and empower them that like you can step outside of the box and still be in compliance. There's no law or rule that says you have to teach it in this way. The standard has to be met. We have to meet the standard, yes. But the whole point of special ed is we all might get to that standard differently. And so I think, I would empower them to show like you can look at my sheets and sheets and sheets of data and progress monitoring and all of that on these ways that step outside the box. So I'm always going to meet the legal standard. I'm always going to do everything that needs to be done. But I think empowering people that like we need to try different ways to reach these learners, because at the end of the day, if we don't, that's where I think we fall into that trap of like, we're complying legally, but is the child really benefiting? That would be my big change is like, we can't, not to be afraid to step out of the box. And I know that's hard, especially early on in your career, because you like come fresh out of school with like, I don't want to mess up any of these things. But,
Very intimidating once you step into that role.
Yeah.
Yeah, that first year for sure. Dr. Cicero, thank you so much for spending time with us here today on our podcast. We will have your contact information in the show notes in case anybody wants to reach out to you. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners?
I think just like the biggest thing for me, with special ed is just continuing not only, I said like stepping out of the box, but like I think so many people can try and trick us into also this like deficit focused teaching, but like really it is strengths based teaching. So like what are their strengths? How can we use them to sharpen those areas of need and like focus on those? Because like our students already know math is hard for me, right? Or they already know reading is hard for me. We don't need to sit on that and focus on that. If we know that they're really great with visuals and they're really great with this or that, like how can we use that to educate them rather than just, they can't read? Let's focus on like they can do X, Y, and Z and use that to like bring that along. So that's something I'm really big on as well, is just like leaning into their strengths, letting them hear their strengths, because even if they're young, they already know. My third graders, for example, like they were aware they weren't reading at the same pace as their peers. They didn't need their safe space environment of their pull-out learning support class to focus on what they already knew about that.
I love that. That is so beautifully said. Thank you again so much. And to our wonderful listeners, thank you for spending time with us here today on our podcast. And until next time, stay well. Thank you again, Dr. Cicero.
Thank you.